Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Kickstarter Weekly. This week's episode is going to cover games that are funding in the period from December 6th through December 12th. And there are only two games that I'm going to be talking about today. I think for the next maybe 4 episodes or so, as we cover through the holiday season, there are going to be a lot fewer games with campaigns that are running. It just seems like most publishers are trying not to run campaigns through the holidays because normally they have to ask a lot of their employees to work long days, long hours, very little time off, and that doesn't really pair that well with the holidays. So I will be talking about 2 different games that are both currently running. They are both on Kickstarter this week, so there are no GameFound games. And before I do that, I am going to first talk to you about 3, maybe 4 games that I've played this week. Depends kind of how you look at it. So the first game that I played this period is Brew. And Brew is a very light dice placement game. It's very cute. I knew that my fiance Kristen was really going to like the look of it. However, I had a strong suspicion, and I was right, that the take that in the game was going to really be too much for her. I think that if you were playing this game at higher player counts, 3 or 4, the take that is probably passed around more, and so it feels less conflict heavy because it's not a case where players are just directly doing things to each other one after the other, after the other. I even knew while we were playing that I had to not take too many high conflict actions. There were a couple that I did that did not go over well, and there were several other ones that I sat on and didn't do, just because I knew it would probably end the game. But in not taking those actions, I definitely cost myself a bunch of points and was kind of accepting not taking the most efficient actions. So I don't really think that she's going to want to play the game again. Maybe if we play with more players. I think she enjoys the game kind of in general, but the take that element that's in there just kind of ruins it for her. And I think if we played it at the higher player counts where, no one person was getting kind of all of the take that actions from another player, it might go over a little better for her. Now, for people who don't mind that, who don't mind take that elements in a game, there's a lot to recommend about this game. It's still probably a little bit on the light side for me. I tend to like heavier games, but there are still pretty decent choices in the game, and it's a game that I would like to keep around because it's very easily and quickly taught. There are yet still choices to be made in it, and it's not that long of a game. There are usually 4 rounds, and you're just going to take some dice placement actions over those 4 rounds, and then the game's over. There is a central board where you can take some of the actions, and that will flip over every round. So essentially, you'll be using the day side of that main board for rounds 1 and 3, and the night side for rounds 2 and 4. And the actions that are available to you will change each round, whether it's daytime or nighttime. Other than that, players are taking actions in forest cards that come out each round. Now, in a 2-player game, it's 3 forest cards. And when you place a dice on those forest cards to take an action, which is either going to be getting some resources or training an animal. And if you train an animal, you get to pick which color animal you take into your player area, and that will give you an ongoing ability. So you're going to be doing one of those 2 things whenever you take a forest action with your dice, with your personal dice. Every player rolls 4 personal dice and 2 elemental dice at the top of every round, and then they use those dice to take actions. So they'll be placing into the forest cards, taking one of those 2 kinds of actions, either getting animals or getting resources, and every time they place a die on one of those cards, they are essentially placing a marker for area control. Now, at the end of the round, you need to have not only more dice than any other player to be able to claim that forest card, you also have to have more dice than any elemental dice. So that's another thing. Each player will start each round with 2 elemental dice. They'll roll those dice along with theirs, and then they'll have whatever faces are showing to use during the round. If players use the water side of the elemental dice, when they place it on a card, they will get essentially 3 times the right resources. So normally when players place a die on a spot for resources, they'll get 1 of those resources. With a water face, you will get +2, so total of 3. If you use the fire side, you're actually going to place it on top of someone else's dice, and that kind of burns their area control on that card. So that die of theirs no longer exists. And you will still get to take the resources or train the animal. You will just also negate that person's die. The third elemental face is a wind symbol, and when you place that die, you will actually place it in place of one of your dies that you have placed previously. You'll still get to take the resources or whatever, and then you will retrieve your die, which means that you will get an extra action that turn, because later on in that round, you will then get to use that die again. So there is area control going on for these forests. Each forest is worth a variable amount of victory points. It says on it, so you'll know during the round as you are placing, you'll know how many victory points you are sort of vying for. You will also have potions that you can buy. So the resources that I've been talking about will allow you to buy a potion, and players are allowed to buy 1 potion every round. They're also allowed to drink 1 potion every round. And the potions allow you to do things with the dice. Sometimes they allow you to re-roll dice. Sometimes they allow you to remove dice. All kinds of various actions involving the dice that will help you. But you can only buy 1 potion and use 1 potion per round. And potions are also worth victory points at the end of the game. I think from the potions I remember seeing, they're worth between 2 and either 4 or 5 points, whereas the forests are worth usually 3 to maybe 7. So the forests are worth more. The animals that players are going to also be recruiting, those are going to be worth 1 point at the end of the game. But if they get a forest card that matches their animal, at the end of the game, they can place that animal into that forest, one forest per animal, and they must match in colors, and that will allow the animal to score 3 points at the end of the game instead of 1, which means as you're getting animals, you'll also want to be paying attention to their color and trying to get forests that match those animals. Now, throughout the game, most players can have up to 3 animals in effect at one time. So that means you'll have 3 animal player powers that you can be using. At any time, you can retire an animal. What that means is you take him out of your player area, he's now retired, and then you have room for another animal. But you'll no longer be able to use that animal's ability. So you're trying to move animals out, from the training area as you think that their abilities no longer serve you. And if you have a forest, you can just boom, put them right in the forest. If you want, you can wait to place animals into the forests until the end of the game. But you can only have 3 animals active at any one time in the training area. There's 1 character that allows you to have 4 active. And then at the end of the game, after 4 rounds of kind of taking these somewhat contentious dice placement turns, you will count up all of the points from your potions. Whether you've used them or not, they're going to score the same amount. You will add up points for the forests that you've collected. The animals that have not been placed in a forest will score 1 point, and the animals that have been placed in a forest will score 3. You'll also get 1 point for every 3 resources you have at the end of the game, and you may have acquired victory points throughout the game. There are cards that give you victory points. So there's 1 animal that gives you a victory point every time you train another animal. There's another animal that gives you a victory point every time you brew up a potion. So you may have acquired victory points throughout the game. You'll add those as well. It's a very quick game. It's very light and breezy. It's a lot of fun, but it does have this, high conflict, take that element to it. So players should be aware of that. And if it doesn't bother you, I think this is a really, really good, it's a smaller box, doesn't take up a huge amount of room on the table, although there are a few different card markets. But it's a smaller box. It's not a lot of stuff. It's quick to teach, quick to play, And it's a lot of fun. And the art is really bright and inviting as well. I think the only thing that's really going to hold people off will be if they don't like high conflict games and they don't like to take that in the game. And also, it may be too light for some players. For me, it's kind of too light in a general sense. Like if I'm looking to play a really good meaty game, I'm not going to reach for Brew. But it's a fun little breezy game that, yeah, I would completely be up to play at the beginning or end of a game night. And I think it definitely has a place in my collection because it is fun and it is still somewhat compelling and it's quick. I think if I had to give Brew a rating right now, it would probably be about a 7, maybe a 6.5. Probably not a 7.5, definitely not an 8. I am planning on doing a first impressions video on this game, so if you're still curious, stay on the lookout for that video, and I will have a more definitive score when I make that video. I also played Grand Austria Hotel, which is a game I've been playing quite a bit lately, and I've talked about it pretty extensively in these videos, so I won't spend too much time with it again. I'll just say that it is also a dice placement game. It's more of a chunky Euro. I would put the base game in the medium range. For players who've played it a lot, probably maybe more medium light. But I think for players who like light games, it's going to feel more in the medium heavy range. I also got Grand Austria Hotel when I backed the Kickstarter, which was for the Let's Waltz expansion. That meant that it came with another box that had 5 different expansion modules in it. I have not played any of those yet. I think it's likely I'll play the base game one more time with my fiance Kristen, who has still to play it. She hasn't played it at all. So the first time we play it, we will play just the base game. And then I'm going to be really looking forward to adding in some of the expansion modules. And it's just a really good game. I think I've said this before, but I put it in a similar category with games like Concordia, which I think are games that heavier gamers can still appreciate and enjoy playing, but lighter gamers can fathom and kind of jump into without too many problems. So Grand Austria Hotel, like Concordia, is a game that I think is a really, really sweet kind of medium weight game that can play a lot of variable gamer difficulty levels and just be kind of a meeting of everyone. And I think everyone, for the most part, can play Grand Austria Hotel, have a good time with it, and, you know, enjoy the game. The one issue I think with Grand Austria Hotel is that because you are selecting dice and the dice that other players select will affect what you can select later, there's also some take that in Grand Austria Hotel as well. And if you are selecting the dice at the beginning of a round, it's kind of a snake draft. So if you're playing, let's say, a 4-player game, the first player is going to get the first turn, and then it's going to go through the second, third, fourth player. The fourth player will get another turn, and then it'll go through the third, second, and back to the first, which means the first player will have the first dice selection and the 8th dice selection in the same round. So by the time it gets back to that first player, he may not like the selections that are left. There is a mechanic in the game where you can pass if you don't like the dice that are left. Everyone else will get to go, and then at the end of the round, you will get to take your turn. But before you do that, you can take one of the dice, put it in the trash bin, and then re-roll all of the dice. And you can keep doing that as many times as you want, but I certainly have had games where I've done that many times in a row, looking for what I wanted, not been able to get it, and each time had the available dice pool to me shrinking and had what I could do kind of getting worse and worse and worse. So it can be fun and funny, but you just have to be ready for that element of you may be painted into a corner and you may need to do the best play that you can with a bad situation. And that's part of the game, and that's part of the fun of it if you find that fun. There's a lot of puzzly elements that I like in Grand Austria Hotel, and as well as the kind of dice selection and choosing what actions you're going to take. You are selecting cards from a row every turn if you can afford them. Sometimes you can take the free ones. And you're going to be then giving those people resources and trying to place them into hotel rooms. You need to prepare those hotel rooms ahead of time So there's kind of a puzzle with that. You have to have that set up, and you have to have the right colors for them. And then as you kind of fill blocks of rooms, depending on the color of the block, you're going to be getting victory points or money, which is really helpful. Money is very tight in the game, or can be, or spaces on an Emperor track that will trigger in the 3rd, 5th, and 7th rounds and will allow players to get bonuses if they're high up enough on that track, or suffer penalties if they're not. If they're just in the middle, they will neither get the reward nor the penalty. But there is a lot of kind of little puzzles in Grand Austria Hotel that combine into a really satisfying puzzle, and it's not super complex in terms of what you're doing. Like, even though there's puzzles to be thinking of and choices to make, there's not so much going on that it burns the brain. Unless you're one of those people who really wants to maximize your actions and you find that you're painted into a corner where you can't, and then you're just stuck not wanting to take an action because all of the actions are bad. That may happen. As long as it doesn't give you analysis paralysis, it's fine. The game itself isn't crunchy in that way, but the decisions of other players and kind of what you're left with may create that situation for you. But, other than that kind of crunch of the gameplay, I think it's a really fun and involving game for gamers of all levels of play. So the final 2 games that I played are kind of related. I mean, they are related. They are Unmatched Battle of Legends Volume 1 and Unmatched Bruce Lee. So there are several base versions, I guess, of Unmatched. There's Battle of Legends Volume 1, Volume 2, and Cobble and Fog. And every one of those sets comes with 4 characters. There's a miniature. Most of the characters get sidekicks, which are some kind of assistants. If you're playing Sherlock Holmes, for instance, you'll get Watson, and he's a little more powerful than some sidekicks, so he has his own health dial. If you're playing someone like Dracula, he'll just get 3 little minions, 3 succubi, and each of them has 1 hit point each. Not every character has minions, and they all have abilities that kind of play differently. So we played the Battle of Legends Volume 1 base set. There are also several packs of 2 characters, and the very cool thing about the 2 character packs is that they still come with a board. It's a little bit smaller, and it's kind of folded in half, but you still get a board, and they're double-sided, so there's ways that you can play, even if you only buy a 2-character pack. The only characters you do not get a board with are the characters that are sold separately. And right now, there are only 2 of those characters. One of them is Bruce Lee, and the other one is Deadpool. So if you buy either of those, you will need something else with a board and other characters to be able to play against. So in our game, my friend who is in from out of town, he's not really a board gamer, but he's played a lot of games with me and he can kind of catch up to speed. He played Medusa from the Battle of Legends Volume 1. And Medusa has 3 minions, kind of like Dracula, 3 1-point minions. And Medusa does ranged attacks. So the player that's playing Medusa wants to use these minions and kind of block up the other player so that the player can't get close to Medusa to do damage. And meanwhile, Medusa can do damage from afar because she has ranged abilities. Meanwhile, the character that I played was Bruce Lee from the standalone set, and he only has melee attacks. So he wants to get close to somebody and then fight them. And there's also deck building in these games. So players are going to start with 5 cards at the beginning of the game, and every turn they have a way to get more cards. They need to take 2 actions, and it can be from 3 different actions, and they can do the same action twice. So one of those actions allows them to draw a card and move up to their move ability. You can also discard another card to boost that if you want to give yourself more move. So you could do that twice in a turn. That could just be your whole turn. Characters will also have these special cards. They're kind of instant cards. They have a lightning bolt on them. It's a scheme. You can play that. Boom. You evaluate the ability on the card. That's the second action you can take. The third one is to play an attack card. When you do that, the person you are attacking will have the opportunity to play a defense card. You play them both face down, then you flip them over. There are various card abilities. They either say immediately, during combat, or after combat. So the way that you kind of evaluate combat is the defense player always goes first. So if they have an immediate ability, that will trigger. Then the attacker's immediate ability will trigger if they have one. Then the defender's during combat ability will trigger. Then the attacker's during combat ability will trigger. Then players will look at the attack value on the attack card and the defense value on the defense card. You'll compare them, and the defender will lose a health point for every point that the attacker has over the defender's value. So the attacker has a 4, the defender has a 2, the defender is going to lose 2 hit points. If the defender has more, they won't do damage to the attacker. They will just not take damage themselves. And once that's done, the defender will process any after combat ability they have, and then the attacker will process any after combat ability that they have. So that's all you're doing. You're either drawing and moving, playing a scheme card, or attacking. And you're doing those things twice on your turn. And you're trying to kill the other person and whittle their health down. So it's a lot of fun if you don't mind high conflict games, because it is a purely conflict game. You're just two people fighting against each other. And I think what makes Unmatched so special is all of the different characters that are out there. So I right now have Battle of Legends Volume 1, which has 4 characters. I have the Robin Hood and Bigfoot pack, and I have the Little Red Riding Hood and Beowulf pack. So I have 2 characters in each of those. I also have Cobble and Fog, which is a 4-character set. And I have Bruce Lee. So I have 13 characters total to choose from. And every character has a different deck with different art, different abilities, different kinds of cards. In general, characters can have different move abilities. They're going to have different mechanics as well. The Invisible Man, for instance, has 3 little invisible tokens that you'll place out on the board, and if he ever goes into one of those areas with his fog, then he gains a defense point, and he can also move between them. So he's kind of teleporting between the fog tokens. Every character has stuff like that is specific to them and very cool and changes up the gameplay. And you're using kind of deck building, and you're playing this miniature skirmish game. But I think what's really cool about the game is the way those decks and those abilities feel very specific to every character, and they all play differently. So Bruce Lee, when I played him, I actually did a pretty good job of whittling down my opponent's minions. I don't think he realized how important they were early on in the game, and so he didn't keep them alive. I was able to kill them all, and then I was just trying to kill Medusa. And Medusa didn't have as many defensive abilities left once those minions were gone. And Bruce Lee has a lot of cards that kind of chain, so you'll do things where you'll execute one action and you'll gain an action, which makes sense with Bruce Lee because he moved so quickly. He moved so fast on film that they didn't always pick up his moves. He was literally moving too fast for the camera. So on some of his movies, they actually had to slow the camera speed down so that it could catch his movements. And the game does a really good job of adapting that for combat. So he's moving so quickly, he'll generate all of these extra actions. Yet he's not invincible. He needs to be in melee range to do damage. And so even in our game, after I was able to kill all of Medusa's minions, Medusa did a very good job of staying away from Bruce Lee. My friend would do a lot of double moves where he'd draw a card and, move away from me. And he would do that twice in a round, so I couldn't catch up to him to hit him. And he was basically just trying to get the right cards. If you have more than 7 cards in your hand at the end of a turn, you have to discard down to 7. But he had all these cards that weren't useful to him because the minions were out of the game. So he was just trying to bide his time, get cards into his deck, and then wait for the right ones where he could really do a lot of range damage. And it was a very close game, and he ended up beating me. And I think that really speaks to how well balanced Unmatched is in general, that you can play any character you want, but if you play them well and you play to their strengths, you still have a chance of winning. Now, the thing that I should have done with Bruce Lee probably that I didn't do at the end of the game, which is probably why I lost, I probably should have been discarding more cards to boost my movement so that I could have gotten to him and then maybe done a damage, or hit him for an attack in one turn. And I was trying to do damage and then get away. I didn't really want to leave myself right next to him because then he could have attacked me. But I didn't know at the time when we were playing that so many of Medusa's cards were ranged attacks that really wouldn't work as well for melee. So I was trying to not be in melee range, but as I found out after the game was over, it really wouldn't have mattered. So something that I should know for the future when I'm playing Bruce Lee is, at least if I'm playing Medusa, is I can just kind of walk right up to her and stay there. And the Medusa player, which my friend didn't know but adapted well to, in the middle of the game, is to better use the minions to just keep Bruce away at all times and then hit him with ranged damage whenever the opportunity presents itself. But I really, really love Unmatched. Again, I tend to favor heavy games, but for me, it's so easy to teach people, and it's so kind of quick to play, and it's just a lot of fun, and there's a lot of variability with all the other characters. So this is kind of something I always want to have in my collection that I can just pull out at the beginning or the end of a game night, play maybe several rounds, maybe with different characters, and just, this is my beer and pretzels game, really. I don't need a $500 CMON game. I can just play Unmatched and play a few rounds and choose between different characters. It's a ton of fun. It's not a brain burner. You still are making choices, so it feels like you have some agency in what you're doing. And I like it in the same way that I like Dice Throne. Although Dice Throne has a little bit more going on because you've got different things, tokens and stuff like that. Although Dice Throne is also this big kind of Yahtzee dice chucker. So Unmatched is more of a deck builder that's a little more focused, I think, in what you're doing. You don't have a million dice to kind of roll and choose from. I'm also looking forward soon to cracking into Wildlands, which is a miniature skirmish game that's very light, that Martin Wallace designed, who's generally more of a heavy Euro designer. And I know that there's deck building involved in that as well. The difference is that plays with factions. So unlike an Unmatched, where every player is playing one character, sometimes with the minions, which are tokens, in Wildlands, every player has a group of miniatures, like 3 or 4 miniatures, so you're working with a team of characters. But it feels very similar to me, not having played it yet, to Unmatched and Dice Throne, in the fact that it is a high conflict fighting game that is going to be very quick to teach, easy to get to the table, and I think quick to play. So I think all 3 of those games are similar in what they're doing, but they all play so well, and they're all so fun, at least from what I've seen so far of Wildlands, that I anticipate keeping all of them in my collection. But we'll see as time goes on. I may get to the point that I feel like I don't need all 3 of them. But I think because they each do what they do in their own way, specific to them, and well, it feels like there's room for all of those games in my collection. Now that we've talked about the games that I played this week, let's talk about the 2 games that are currently funding on Kickstarter. The first of these is called 3 New Valeria-Universe Games, and that's going to fund on December 10th. Now, they had a minimum required funding for this one of $25,000. They're currently sitting at $51,000, which is only 2 times that minimum required funding goal. However, I am filming this video finally when I should be filming it, which is the Friday before the week that it's applicable to, which means it's a little earlier than normal, and so there's more time for that number to go up. I also think that even though it's only at 2 times funding, it's still fine. It's going to fund, and it's with a game or a series of games that are with a known IP, so I'm not worried about it. In fact, I think this is a great opportunity for people to get some smaller games within a well-known IP, and we'll talk about that as we kind of get further into this entry. So this is actually a Kickstarter for 3 different games: Dice Kingdoms of Valeria, Siege of Valeria, and Thrones of Valeria. And every one of these games is going to have a different player count. So Dice Kingdoms is for 1 to 5 players, so it's meant to be a multiplayer game. It can be played solo. Siege of Valeria is a one-player game, so it is specifically a solo game. And Thrones of Valeria is for 2 to 6 players. So that is intended not for solo play. Now, every single one of these games plays in 30 to 45 minutes. They're also all light complexity. And the publisher here has run a bunch of Kickstarters over the years, so we're not too worried about them. I'm going to set the risk on this campaign at medium low. So what are these 3 games about? Well, Dice Kingdoms of Valeria is essentially a roll and write game. So players are going to be drafting dice, taking actions. It's a roll and write. That's the reason that it can be played multiplayer. It can also be played solo if you just want to try to score as well as you can and kind of play the efficiency puzzle of it and play it by yourself. Siege of Valeria is designed as a solo game, and it is a tower defense game. So you're going to be taking actions, kind of an efficiency puzzle, and trying to keep the enemies at bay until you win the game. Thrones of Valeria is a card game and a trick-taking game, which is why you need at least 2 players to play it. It plays 2 to 6 players. Interestingly, Isaiah Vallejo is generally the designer of all things Valeria, but he has not designed any of these 3 games. So these are all games from other outside designers. I'm not sure if he kind of went looking for designers or they came to him. But in any case, these are 3 standalone games in the Valeria universe. They're all kind of smaller games, and each one is designed by a different person. Levi Moat designed Dice Kingdoms of Valeria, and he has also designed Horizons and Ruse. Glenn Flaherty has designed Siege of Valeria, and this is going to be his first published game. And Matt Jacobs designed Thrones of Valeria, and he's designed one other game. It's called Kitten Clash. The artist on all 3 games is the same artist that has been doing all of the art for the entire Valeria series. That is Mahalo Dmitrievsky. You may know him as the Miko. He is best known for Architects of the West Kingdom, Paladins of the West Kingdom, Raiders of the North Sea, Valeria Card Kingdoms, although as I said, he's done all of the Valeria games, and Viscounts of the West Kingdom. And if it's not clear from those credits, he's also done all of the North Sea games, all of the West Kingdom games. Those are all the Garpel Games series. And he's also done all of the art for Final Frontiers games, which is stuff like Cavern Tavern, Rise to Nobility, Merchant's Cove, and they just did a new one for Bardwood Grove. So the Miko has his fingers in a lot of pies, and certainly Final Frontier, the Valeria stuff, all of the Garpel games, those are 3 big pies. Finally, this game is being published by Daily Magic Games. That is Isaiah Vallejo's company. They publish all of the Valeria games. The 3 that are the highest rated on Board Game Geek are Quests of Valeria, the original game, Valeria Card Kingdoms, and Villages of Valeria. Now, we've got 3 pledge levels here, and it's going to be silly ridiculous as I start to name them because it's very obvious how they work. There are also no add-ons, so it depends how many of these games you want. Do you want 1 game, 2, or 3? If you want 1 game, you're going to pledge the $30 pledge level called 1 game. If you want 2 games, you're going to pledge the $55 pledge level called 2 games. You see where this is going, right? If you want all 3 games, you're going to pledge the $75 pledge level called 3 games. And then finally, Daily Magic Games is anticipating delivering this campaign in September of 2022. Our second and final game that we're looking at that is currently running is called Mindbug First Contact, and Mindbug is going to fund on December 11th. Now, unlike the Valeria Kickstarter, this one has done bonkers for its minimum funding goal. The minimum funding goal here was $5.7 thousand. They're currently at $198,000, which is 35 times that minimum required funding goal. Now, both of these campaigns are smaller campaigns, so you're not necessarily spending an arm and a leg on these. They're both making it very easy to pledge for some good stuff here. But the fact that I think Mindbug has such a high multiplier just speaks to how successful this campaign already is. And it's not going to complete until December 11th. So there's plenty of time for them to get another $100,000 or $200,000 of pledges in that time. Now, this is a game for 2 players, although they are in the process of working on a 4-player rule set. It's not done. I don't know what that's going to look like. I also don't know if there's going to be a rule set for 3 players or if it's only going to be, like a 2v2 team thing. But I do know that when this delivers, there will likely be a 4-player rule set. If you want that, you probably need to pledge 2 copies of the game at least to have enough cards to be able to play at that level. Just know that it is designed for 2 players. They are working on the ability for it to play up to 4. Games play in 15 to 25 minutes. The complexity on this is also light. And we're going to set the risk on this one at high because it's a first-time publisher essentially running a Kickstarter for the first time. However, keep in mind that there are some very good designers working on this game. It's not a super expensive game. It's a card game. So even though I'm setting the risk at high, I'm personally not very worried about this one. I think you're going to get your game. It's not going to cost that much to produce. It's a smaller scope, and they've got legitimately good people working on it. So there are 4 designers here. The first designer is named Scaff Elias, and he has previously worked on Dungeons & Dragons miniatures, Harry Potter, trading card game, and Twitch. The most famous designer in this pack is definitely Richard Garfield. He has previously worked on Android Netrunner, Bunny Kingdom, King of Tokyo, Magic the Gathering, and Robo Rally. So he's had a very kind of interesting, eclectic career. The 2 remaining designers are named Marvin Hegan and Christian Kudel, and neither of them have any other games to their credit. So this is a first-time publish for both of them. The artist on Mindbug is named Dennis Martinetz. He's previously worked on 10-Minute Heist, The Wizard's Tower, Chocolate Factory, and Imperial Settlers Roll and Write. And then the publisher here is Nerd Lab Games, and again, this is their first published game. They don't have any other games yet to their credit, which is the reason that we're setting this campaign on high as far as a risk goes, even though I'm really not that worried about it. Now, there are 3 different pledge levels to be aware of in this campaign. The first is for $17. It's called the Mindbug Duelist, and that's going to get you the base game, which is a 2-player game. For $29, you can pledge at the Mindbug Pioneer level. That's going to add in 2 things: a limited edition box, woo, and an upgrade pack called New Creations. Now, that's going to have 29 cards in it. There are 5 promo cards, which leaves 24 cards, and there are going to be 12 new monster cards, so essentially you'll have 2 of each. So 12 times 2 is 24, plus the 5 promo cards, 29 cards total. That's a pack that will not be included at retail, so people buying this at retail will just get the base game. And no limited edition box either. Finally, you can pledge at the $68 Mindbug Colonist level. That will get you everything we talked about previously, plus 2 playmats. So if you're going to be playing this head-to-head, you want each player to have a playmat, you can pledge at that level. You get 2 playmats. There's one more pledge level that I'm not really going to mention specifically. That's more for people that are going in on this together, and that will essentially get you 4 copies of everything. But most people pledging for themselves aren't going to want 4 copies of the base game or 4 copies of the promo pack. They don't need that. But for people who want to go in together, take a look at the campaign, check it out. There is a pledge level where you can kind of get 4 copies of everything. And then finally, Nerd Lab Games is anticipating delivering Mindbug in June of 2022. So that wraps the currently running Kickstarter section. I am going to reveal the 2 games that I personally pledged from last week's video next. So I did throw it out to commenters last video saying, take a guess. See if you can guess what I backed of the 8 games that I was profiling in that video. And someone guessed correctly. Timothy Shu, I think is how you pronounce his last name. I'm not 100%. But he guessed Hegemony, Lead Your Class to Victory, and Resurgence. And those are both correct. So Hegemony, Lead Your Class to Victory is a game that Rahdo is super high about. It has players kind of working within a government of a country and simulating the economic systems and political systems, and it just looks like a really good crunchy Euro, and it seems to be doing things gameplay-wise and mechanically that haven't really been done before. I do have a game that I got this past year, I think, called Chasen, which is a board game that has to do with elections, and it's political in the sense that you are kind of taking political actions, but the game itself isn't political. So it's not trying to start conversations about specific politics. Maybe trying to start conversations in a larger sense about what players think is important politically, but it's not doing it with the weight of a country's political system. It's not going to kind of get in there and divide people along political party lines, which I think is really, really smart. It just kind of puts the emphasis on the gameplay and how it uses those systems. And from everything that I've seen, Hegemony is very much the same way. It is a chunky Euro that's kind of working with these systems and making gameplay mechanics based on those kinds of systems. So I'm really looking forward to getting that game into my hands and kind of seeing how it plays and seeing how it does things in a way that I don't think other games are really doing. And it looks good too. It's very sharp. It's got bright colors. It's visually appealing. But this is one of those games that I think, for the most part, I need to kind of get it into my hands, play it myself, push the buttons, pull the levers, see how it works to make a final determination on whether it's a game for me or not. But it is kind of in my wheelhouse of the kinds of games that I like to play and what it's doing mechanically, so I have high hopes for it. The other game, Resurgence, didn't actually do that well because it was being produced by Stan Kordonsky through his new company, Half a Kingdom Games, and this is the very first game that they've produced. However, Stan has been on a roll lately. He's made a lot of really good games. He did Rurik, Dawn of Kiev. He did the expansion for that, Stone and Blade. He has a game that's going to be delivering soon called Endless Winter Paleo-Americans. And all three of those, well, two of them are one game, the game and its expansion, but all three of those have gotten so much high praise. And now Resurgence, it's being said that it's the best out of all of his games. So I'm very excited about it. I wish that more people were excited about it and pledged it. I think when it comes out and people start playing it and reviews are written, I think a lot more people are going to realize what a good game it is and want it. Hopefully it will be available at retail, or they'll do another Kickstarter later on. And I think they deserve a lot more business than they got on this campaign, so I'm hoping that it'll pay off down the line for them. But essentially, Resurgence is a bag builder and a hidden worker placement game. Both of those things sound really appealing to me and really amazing, and again, kind of, it may be doing things that we haven't really seen any or many games do before. So I'm really excited to get a look at that one, and I think Stan is just getting better and better and better, and he's already working at such a high level, and I think becoming one of the better game designers working today. So I don't know. If you didn't pledge it, be looking to see if you can get in on a late pledge. And if that doesn't work out, be looking for it at retail, or just keep your eyes open for a later campaign. Because I think a lot more people are going to want this game, both to play it and to own it, once it kind of cycles into their awareness. I think it's just, maybe for a lot of people, they're just not aware of it yet. So those are the two games that I pledged this period, and Timothy was right. But feel free to play this week and guess in the comments below if I'm backing both of these games this week, either one, none. What do you think? Let me know. Okay, so the two games that I acquired this period, neither one's really a game on its own, but two things that I acquired. One was the Dune Imperium upgrade pack. I've kind of been waiting for that one to come in. I pre-ordered that, oh gosh, at the beginning of 2021, I think, somewhere maybe March or April. And it's just taken so long for them to produce it and then deliver it. And then it was delivering seemingly to everybody else out there. But I finally got my copy. It takes the kind of cubes in Dune Imperium and replaces them with small little miniatures. There's a lot of kind of upgrades to it. There's also sleeves. So I need to open this thing up, punch it, combine it with the base game, which I've already played a bunch of times and I really, really like, and hopefully get some Dune Imperium played soon with the new components. But I really do like Dune Imperium. I think it is one of the best 2020 kind of mid-range games, mid-weight games. That and Lost Ruins of Arnak are both these really, really good medium weight games that came out in 2020 that both combined deck building and worker placement. And they do it in different ways. I think there is definitely room in anyone's collection for both, but they do take both of those mechanics and kind of combine them and utilize them in different ways that are both very, very effective and kind of unique and special to the type of games that those games are. So big recommendation for anyone really to play Dune Imperium. And if you were lucky enough to get the Dune Imperium upgrade pack when it was available, as I did, I don't know if there'll be more copies available eventually, you're probably excited as well. The other thing that I got was the Wildlands, the Adventuring Party. So that is kind of an add-on faction. I mentioned at the top of this video that I'm quite enamored with Unmatched, Dice Throne, and Wildlands, and I've kind of been putting together my Wildlands collection. There were two factions that were add-ons that you had to buy separately. I managed to track them both down. The Adventuring Party was the last one. So I now have everything, and I need to get that game completely punched and then start playing it with people, kind of like Unmatched at the beginning or maybe the end of a game night, and just have kind of easy breezy miniature fighting deck building fun. As far as what's coming this period, unfortunately last week's Kickstarter Weekly, it took me so long to edit because it was a longer video and I just had a lot of things happening with Thanksgiving and post-Thanksgiving and a friend in from out of town who was here from Atlanta that I only get to see maybe once or twice a year. So I just didn't have as much time this week and the editing took a lot of time. So by the time I finally got the Kickstarter Weekly published, it was like Wednesday of this week that's just gone by, just 2 days ago. And here I am already working on the next Kickstarter Weekly. So I actually have not had time to do any other videos this period. However, I am planning on editing this video tonight, but then not releasing it for maybe a day or two. And during that time, tomorrow, Saturday, I plan to shoot my October Game of the Month video and a first impressions video, probably for Brew, just because I know I can shoot that quickly. And I plan on getting at least one of those videos edited and posted before this. So when you see this posted, probably Saturday night or Sunday morning, one of those two videos should already be up, and the other one should be posting probably Sunday night. Now that means that I did not get the Dinosaur World First Impressions video done. I also did not get Unsettled First Impressions done, so those will be done next week, along with next week's Kickstarter Weekly, which I anticipate, much like this one, will be a shorter video. So those three videos will land next week for sure. If I have more time next week, I plan on probably cycling back and getting First Impressions videos done for Kemet Blood and Sand and Embarcadero. Beyond that, I'll talk about that next video. But I still do have my November Game of the Month video to get done, so that'll probably be that following week, along with a few other First Impressions videos, which I'll talk about next week. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you're having a good month, a good holiday season, playing as many good games as you can, just having lots of fun with board games. Check out whichever one of those other videos is already posted if you haven't yet, and be looking for the other one very soon, within the next 24 hours. And then next week you should see the Dinosaur World and Unsettled First Impressions videos land. I'm super excited to do Unsettled. It is just a great fun game, as well as next week's Kickstarter Weekly. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe. And if you want to be notified whenever I publish videos, you can do that by hitting the alarm bell after you subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.